Right, okay. Another hand history. This one took place one drop, heads up against Andreas Eiler. Really good player, obviously. Long-time heads up professional, so he's going to know exactly what's going on in this game, sadly for me. I have a bit of heads up experience myself, been playing mostly that for the past almost 2 years now, so I feel confident as well. Mostly cash games with 100 big blind stacks, but a lot of the concepts do apply when you're a bit shorter as well. So in this hand, we're like 30 to 40 big blinds deep, and he raises on the button. I have 8-7 offsuit, which is a decent hand to defend with heads up. You're almost always going to call. Sometimes you'd want to 3-bet, but very infrequently. I have no real reason to 3-bet, so I call. Comes 8-5 deuce, rainbow. Really good flop for my hand. I obviously check. He decides to continuation bet, and I, well, have a few options here where for once I could check call, this is a standard play, I could check raise. I'd prefer doing that if I had a hand like ace-8, because ace-8 at 40 big blinds I would almost certainly check raise. If I had a hand like 8-5 suited, I would opt for a check call most likely. So I keep this in mind already, because it's always important to decide what you're going to do with all of your hands at this point. In game I decided I want to be mostly check calling here, and as I didn't have ace-8 or king-8, which would benefit mostly from check raising, I decided call. Mostly when I call here, the plan is to check almost all the turns, but the turn here is a 5, bringing a backdoor flush with the 5 of clubs, with the 8 of clubs on board and the 5 of clubs on the turn. And the 5 works in that way that now I do have more strong hands than him, because I'm expecting Andreas to mostly check back with his 5s. If he had a hand like 5-4, or, well, most of the 5s he's going to check back certainly. If he had a hand like queen-5, that's in my opinion a clear check. And if you had a like ace-5, that would be a bet, but basically the most important concept here is still that I have all the 5s, which I would check call, but he has none of the 5s. So I decide on a turn lead here for roughly half the pot or something, 40 to 50% of the pot, because I figure that with my, I should still likely be ahead, because he mostly has overcards, and he's going to be checking back the turn like roughly 70 to 80% of the time he's going to check, and he's going to get to realize the equity with his random. What's a random hand here? Random Jack-9 would be terrible, because then he has 2 overcards, or even a hand such as Queen-7, Queen-6. Basically, there's so many hands that have so much equity against me that I would rather have him fold now, that I decide that this would be a good spot to lead. This concept is very important when, not only when the middle card pairs, as most people apply it, but it's also important when your top pair on the board is quite low. For example, if I had a king and the board was king 5-2, 5 instead on the turn, I would opt to check with most of my kings, because what's the point of betting? You don't get to deny equity against the queen. There's only one overcard, the ace in that case. But here there's a 9, a 10, a jack, a queen. So basically I decide that it's very important here to lead. And also another important concept to keep in mind when leading the turn is the stack size. A shorter stack size means you should be leading more, because it's less big of a deal that you don't have any nuts. For example, if this was 200 big blinds deep, having a bare 5, I couldn't really play for a stack. So would I really want to lead a 5? I probably would, but that's not just the point here. Because at 30 big blinds, an 8 is good enough to lead, and he can't really do anything about it. Because if I lead now, he can't go crazy. Because if he was to try to punish me with an 8, so be it. At the 30 big blinds, I can just go call, and that's the end of that. He can't really do anything about it. But at 100 big blinds, leading with an 8 could become a problem, because then he could raise me with an overpair and bet big on the river. And now I suddenly have way too many 8s. Now, so that's why I lead. Andreas thinks for a little bit and calls. And what happens now is that the river is a king. And that's not really that good of a card for me, because he could have certainly a few number of kings here. But what the card fortunately does, and that a lot of people don't realize, is that I now end up chopping with a lot of the better 8s. Because now we're playing 8-8, 5-5, and the king on the river. So unless he has ace-8, an overpair, or a 5, I'm chopping against him, and that's nice. But he could also have a fair number of ace-x hands. He could have a lot of deuces that he c-bet on the flop, which, as I said, he doesn't c-bet too many of them. So in my mind, I'm thinking, what's the best course of action here? I certainly don't want to make a big bet, because that would be overplaying the 8. We would most likely be getting into chopping, maybe trying to bluff someone with a chop, and that's not really a thing here, heads up. So so I'm deciding, should I check call and catch a bluff against his turn flush draws, or should I think that's the way most people would play it. But in game, I decided that I'm that I have enough of a hand to make a small block bet here. I think that I could be check calling the turn with many other hands. And the reason this is good is also because if I had a hand such as 6-7, 6-4, 4-3, so you can already see the number of bluffs that I could potentially have, is that that's actually where I want to bet a quarter of the pot in the end. And I think a lot of people don't make that play. A lot of people would either check or make a big bet. And the reason why a quarter of the pot is good, because it forces him to call with a deuce. It forces him to only call if he had an 8. If he somehow hit a king, I'm sort of in trouble, but I would be in trouble anyway. He might opt to raise. But also I can certainly make the play sometimes with a 5. So if he starts raising too aggressively against my quarter pot bet, he would be getting called a lot or re-raised a lot. So really it's a tough spot for him. And basically what I do is I force him to call with a lot of the holdings that he would otherwise just check behind. For example, if he had queen high clubs that turn flush drawn, and then I check the river, he's not going to bluff those. He would just check them behind. So, but if I bet a quarter of the pot, and he has a hand such as queen jack with clubs even, or no clubs, which he could call on the turn certainly, then now he's in a spot where I have all these bluffs of 4-3, 4-6. There's so many draws that bricked, and if he has anything that could beat those hands, he's very seriously enticed to call. And it also helps that most people wouldn't bet the 8 that way as well. So actually I think the reason to block bet an 8 there is how my range works in that way, is how many logical bluffs I could have, and yeah, just basically force him to call with ace high. And he called with queen deuce, and I won. But he gave it some serious thought, and I think queen deuce is a very easy call. I'm not entirely sure why he c-bet the flop, but it's certainly fine sometimes to bet the bottom pair with a good kicker. In my mind, I was expecting him to mostly check with his deuces, and I thought on the river I would be looking at getting mostly called from some hero call, like a queen high or an ace high. But the deuce is not far off from those hands, and I think he played the hand very well. He made a very good call there, and yeah, I just think it's important to, when you make those bets, to also sometimes, just occasionally have the 5. Very infrequently, because you don't really need to have it as often, because, as I explained earlier, he can't really punish me for having a capped range, because the stack sizes are short. But when you're playing this hand at 100 big blinds, it's very crucial to have a 5 in your range sometimes, just so you can call when they raise you on the end.